thank you very much for coming and joining us here. It's just like a very brief introduction. You're all here to listen to the debate, Professor Zhang, and also Susanne. They will also organize in the as a moderator session. Because Zhang, but clearly it does some in its size, but this is it. So that's thank you for being here. Thanks to the Gates Center for hosting this session here with us. My name is Rafael Heiber from the Common Action Forum, and if this session is also happening here, it's because Professor Zhang from Pekín University is right now the resident fellow at the Baconese Europe. So thanks to the Baconese CPT this past year with us. So briefly, I'd just like to give you some sort of that. And then so far today, we were at the Carlos University, Carlos University this morning, talking to the students, talking to the colleagues about geopolitics, about Europe, about China. And I think that is a very good warming up for us to arrive today here. That's having some decision taking. We will have like I think 40 minutes session, and then you might have the chance to also have some some questions. Professor Zhang will also answer questions like you have like this conversation and debate. So basically, thank you very much for being here. And Susanne, please just pass it to you. And thank you again.
Thank you very much, Rafael, and thanks to the Common Action Forum, which made it possible to have you here this morning. So normally we do events in the afternoon. This is an exception, and I'm very glad that everybody could come here in this morning for a Spanish, from a Spanish perspective, not so much from a German perspective. So I'm the academic coordinator of the GATE Center. So I'm doing all the activities, all the few activities we have, publications, events, so on. So, and this is the inauguration of our first GATE dialogue. So it's a pleasure having you here this morning. Mr. Zhang, maybe a little bit on his biography. You speak German. We just try to exchange a little bit in German.
I'm nicht gut.
And he has done his PhD in the University of California, Los Angeles. So he has like a Chinese experience and a Western experience, or US experience, which is not anymore the same. The West doesn't exist anymore. So, and he's also the deputy director of the Institute of Area Studies, Asia, I guess, Area Studies, and associate professor of the School of Law and deputy director of the Office of Humanitarian Social Sciences at the Pekín University. So I'm very glad that you're here this morning, and we just maybe go into our dialogue, which will be, since the GATE Center is more focused on global southern affairs, or the global south, what we call global south. Mm-hmm. So, and I did a series, or not, I didn't write it, but we had a series on the BRICS countries. Russia is the part which is missing. So we will have a publication on Russia too. And I would like to ask you a little bit about your views from a Chinese and US Western perspective. What's going on in these turbulent times, no? More focusing us maybe on current affairs, on Donald Trump. Everybody talks every day about Donald Trump. China and the international disorder, because the old liberal order doesn't exist anymore. So what do we have now? I mean, the first question would be a little bit, how does China perceive the crisis of the international liberal order? And what would be China's model of global governance? Because in his message at the nation, Xi Jinping, he talked about this global governance, which I thought it is dead, but maybe it is still alive. So please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to express my gratitude to the GATE Center Common Action Forum and the Background Institute because of this invitation, I have this opportunity to come here and share my humble insights regarding the current grand transformation of this global order. So I will keep it very short and just share my key points, without elaborating on it. So basically, I think now almost the unipolarity, the post-war Cold War unipolarity world, is going to the end, obviously. But then what is the next order? I think this is quite uncertain. So by the end of last year, the U.S. just launched this kind of new national security strategy, in which you can see there's a new framework going on. From my point of view, this obviously reflects the America First, the whole spirit. And first of all, there is a focus upon the so-called Western Hemisphere. So for the first time, the Western Hemisphere predominates as the primary region that the U.S. really concerned about. So I do think that the so-called Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, or he called it the Monroe Doctrine. This is something we should take it seriously because he really want to use the Western Hemisphere as a base for the American hegemony. This is, from my point of view, he demonstrated some kind of expansion in the Western Hemisphere. So the issue of Venezuela and Greenland, so give us an impression that the U.S. is expanding extremely in the Western Hemisphere. However, on the global level, I think it's kind of still. No, it's not expansion in the traditional sense. Why? Because from my point of view, in the post-Cold War period, with the unipolarity, actually what the U.S. have is kind of global moral doctrine. Actually, it's kind of global moral doctrine, which is, take the whole world as its own sphere of influence. And then it try to define the homogeneity of this world order and try to exclude the heterogeneous elements in it from this order. And this is why, during this global moral doctrine period, U.S. could launch this kind of regime building in Iraq and Afghanistan. They can do that because they do have uphold to a certain kind of their world governance principles, ideals, values, and institutions. They have this. However, under all these years, you can find that now Donald Trump and the political forces behind him tend to regard that that kind of system is no longer beneficial to the U.S. because it really costs too much. Let me put the deal. So during the post-Cold War period, usually we can say there's such a deal. The U.S. provides some kind of public good for the global order in terms of security and in terms of this kind of dollar supremacy. And also, U.S. also opened its market, pretty much open to every country, most countries. And then U.S. does not need that. You have to open your market in return. So, I mean, this is kind of arrangement that, for U.S. to attract the military and political support of the most other countries. So this is the arrangement, this is the deal. However, under such a situation, you can say, with the all kind of removal of the barriers of financial capitalism, so the Wall Street oligarchs really want to have immediate profits. Then you see the American companies really, they want to get more profits. Then they, on one hand, they will outsource the manufacturing part to a lot of countries in the global south. And the second, they will, the oligarchs, also have a lot of immigrants into the U.S. in order to reduce the cost of this labor. And all these two sides create some kind of grievance. So in this MAGA movement. So in other words, all these today's situation are already, they are originated in this global post-World War globalization arrangement. It's already there. So today, Donald Trump believes that this is no longer the deal that the U.S. could accept. So then you can see that he no longer tend to provide such an order, public goods for the world. And then, so my reading of this national strategy, security strategy is like this. The U.S. really In terms of the hegemony, they reduce their commitment to the consent part, but then they try to consolidate the coercion capacity. So here I use the Gramsci's concept of hegemony. So hegemony consisting of two parts, consent and the coercion. Usually, if you have the strong coercive power, then you may have capacity to create more, manufacture more consent. So now, because of the coercive part of the U.S. has at least the self-perception is not strong enough, so they really reduce, the consent part, and now try to strengthen the coercion part. So here, Western Hemisphere become very important. So here I see a project of fortification of economy. So I mean, the U.S. try to attract all these kind of supply chain, back to its United States and the areas surrounding it. So and there's effort to exclude China from all these kind of supply chain. And the U.S. also want to use the Western Hemisphere as an instrument to solve its domestic problem. Those problems like the immigration and drug trafficking, those kind of problems. There's a lot of the domestic-driven forces. Mm-hmm. However, in terms of the Eastern Hemisphere, I don't think there's kind of clear promise that the U.S. really want to divide the sphere of influence with other great powers. There's no such promise because my perception is that in the Western Hemisphere there should establish some kind of firm control. In the Eastern Hemisphere, U.S. still want to play a major veto power. Mm-hmm. In other words, the idea is to avoid any new power to take the place of the U.S. So the idea is already there. And in recent, it's the national defense, the spending, you can see that a lot of resources are input in the Indo-Pacific area. So with a focus on China actually. So I think that is the whole framework according to my understanding. Then if for China, this kind of Western Hemisphere thing may cause some loss. I think this loss is probably most of the commercial. It's kind of commercial loss. Because in Venezuela, China has investment, and also in Panama, Donald Trump really want to recontrol the Panama Canal, right? So there might be some kind of business loss. However, on the European side, I do think that it's really not simply about business. It's about existential status of Europe. It's a question about who am I. So, in other words, just as Connie pointed out, in his famous speech at Davos, the illusion of rules-based international order has broken. So now, what the Europe could do, its over-reliance upon the U.S. military protection now suddenly become a problem. In the past, it's not a problem, but now when the U.S. become from a protector to a predator, then it's going to be a major issue to address. So then here we can saw the turn to the so-called middle power strategy. The idea is to align with other middle powers in order to create a kind of space, and just new space of cooperation. But as a Chinese scholar, when I look at this middle power proposal, obviously, China was not the first partner, right? Obviously in it. So European Union now, first of all, goes to India and go to Latin America to seek this kind of trade agreement. And some are quite successful. But obviously now, I think there's some kind of still some worry about the Chinese position in terms of its relation with EU. So I think there's some kind of uncertainty between European Union and China. However, I do think in this state of uncertainty, some things should be done between EU and China. So I will propose different, maybe three aspects. three aspects. So the first aspect, I think it's really about international order. So respect for international law and the provision of public goods. So Trump make it very clear that international law is not in his mind. He said that the only thing can stop me is my morality, right? Which only means that international law does not exist for him. So, however, China and Europe, first of all, China is a standing member of the Security Council of the United Nations, and the European Union, as a organization, is really based upon international law, pretty much like that. So, I mean, this kind of international nihilism is detrimental to both China and Europe. So, I think there should be some kind of merge of this vision to uphold the UN Charter, abide by international law, and support multilateralism. And then also there's a large vacuum in the international organization, because now the US withdraw from a lot of such organizations, UNESCO, WHO, right? So then suddenly there's a problem, who's going to fund these organizations and who's going to play the role in these organizations and provide public goods for the world. So I think on these aspects, I do think that China and Europe has a lot to talk about. And secondly, it's about resilient supply chains and technology cooperation. In Europe, in recent years, this topic was originally pretty much framed by the US, and which for long portrayed China as a threat. But now Europe discovered America's own predatory tendencies. So if the US is no longer a source of stability, so maybe can China and Europe engage in a more realist cooperation? For instance, in green energy, China is now the leading country, in green energy. We produce the largest scale solar energy and wind energy. Of course, also in the nuclear. So the green energy accounts for very high percentage of China's all the energy supply. And also we build up a lot of infrastructures for this kind of green transformation and the cutting of carbon emission. So I mean, in terms of this kind of green transformation, China is really very serious. And the China's political system make it possible to do that, because we have a political system who is able to set a project and we can implement the project. So I know that here a lot of people in Europe may complain that China is look like a black box. We don't know what is going on within China. However, actually China is quite transparent in terms of what China is going to do. Why? Because China is a country constantly making plans. So for example, we have 5-year plans. 5-year plan. Now we are making the 15th term of a 5-year plan. And what should be written in this 5-year plan has been made very clear. And also we have annually we have this government report. And the government report on one hand will review what has been done last year, and there will be some kind of discussion about what should be done this year. So all these are online and translated in different languages. But I was surprised that very few European scholars and statesmen really seriously look at these papers. So from my point of view, China is quite stable because we have these plans and we really stick to these plans. Why? I also have some administrative working skills, so I know anything written in such kind of plans. Usually, they need some they will have some accountability, which means that if you don't do that, then you may lose your office. You may lose your post, because of the accountability. So China is not so such a black box. I think on these aspects, it's quite transparent. And also in terms of the AI side, I think the US OpenAI is ironically closed. It's closed source, While China, usually, we adopt a open source strategy. So like DeepSeek, it's open source, and anyone can download it and use it in your computer. You can train it, and you adapt it to your own needs. So a lot of countries in Global South, initially, they really cannot imagine, how to start their AI projects. And then they finally find that, China has this open source model. So then we can see that a lot of countries in Global South now download these China's model and try to train their own model on it. So then, the EU, of course, is developing its own model. But on this side, I think both sides, you have a lot to cooperate with, not only in technology, but also in terms of the political and ethical use of AI. What's the limit? Should we share? I think this kind of projects should be very important. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, I think that is the mutual understanding of civilization and social political systems. So many Europeans agree with Connie that this illusion of rules-based international order has ended. In China, what it means by rules-based international order? Usually we don't use that term. We use international law-based international order. What's the difference? International law-based international order makes it very clear what is the rules. The law is UN Charter and the international law, the current international law. While rules-based international order are often used as a synonym of liberal international order, which means that liberal democracy is going to be the central power, and countries like China should be marginal. So that is the difference. So then a lot of the discussion going on, whether China is a challenge to the current order. But in China, we always claim that we are defender of the current order. So we have different understanding of what it means by the current order. For China, the current order is the order built on United Nations. And China is a major shareholder, one of the shareholders. So there's no reason for China to overturn an order in which we are one of the major shareholders, right? But then, if you frame the status quo as a liberal, rules-based international order, a liberal order, then it's going to be, it seems that China like, a kind of external challenge. So now if this illusion of liberal international order is ended, then I think there might be, some kind of, we have to think about diversifying our understanding of, political and social systems and civilizational traditions. And maybe, in the past, many believe that China would eventually become an electoral democracy like many other countries. So then, it is not necessary to study China very seriously because sooner or later, China is going to change into something else. But now today, I think we have to think about China's political system, China's forms of organization may last very long. And then not only last very long, in the future, they could serve as the basis of ecological transformation, because this really a system really capable of implement this kind of ecological transformation. So I feel that now there is a severe asymmetry of understanding between Europe and China. In China, usually we have a lot of scholars who learn the European languages, and we study Europe. Maybe 1,000 of scholars like me. But in Europe, of course, we can find very wonderful China experts. However, there are not so many. So I believe that in the future, if this kind of asymmetry can be overcome, then a lot of misunderstanding, miscalculations can be avoided, and cooperation can be pushed forward. So these are my humble insights, and I look forward to your critiques and responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. A broad overview on all the questions I was supposed to ask you. So you answered nearly everything. May I start with some comments, kind of introduction, and then we open the floor to the audience. you said the international liberal order, no, which is maybe my main point, no. What would be the Chinese view on how to reform the UN Security Council, which is nearly it's blocked, no? It's vetoed by Russia or by the US, or we had a debate in 2005, no, the World Summit, and nothing happened at the end. There were no reform. So the UN is in a quite bad shape, no. There will be elections to the UN secretary this year, no. I don't know who will be at the end, maybe somebody from Latin America, but there's an urgent need for reform. And then we have like values which China obviously does not share or does interpret in a different way, like the human rights. If you think about the responsibility to protect, these are also UN principles where we have maybe shared views on, or the universality of human rights. What does it mean? So there are some, as you said, asymmetries also in how we interpret from the European perspective. I'm not talking about the US. And the Chinese perspective, some values, or principles of the UN, which would be interesting to cooperate more. I absolutely agree that the EU and China, we should do more things together and not perceive each other like competitors. Competitors in a certain sense, but not in everything. I think it's not, maybe the international liberal order is in crisis for many years. And it's not only Donald Trump. Maybe we have to see the US beyond Donald Trump. His mandate will end.
Sure.
And then maybe we will have a comeback of the US or maybe of Democrats, and the liberal order will have again a US leadership. This can also happen. We don't know. Populists are normally anti-liberal. Anti-globalization, anti-liberal order, anti-democracy, And they are not so rational. So I think maybe Donald Trump, I don't see huge rationality, as you said, behind his mind. But maybe we have different views on that. Then the Monroe Doctrine, how does it affect China in Latin America and other zones? As you mentioned, the Indo-Pacific. It's bad for their interests. In a sense, the Monroe Doctrine will be applied to China and Russia. Obviously, mainly to China. So it's not an open rivalry at the moment. Trump is having like another agenda. More looking at Iran, looking at other countries, and Cuba, on I don't know, Mexico, but not so much on China. He's not having it like a focus. It's more indirect. This would be my main questions on you. I have others, but maybe we can open the debate. And then you said, the unipolarity. I think it's over for many years, the unipolarity. But I don't know. This was a debate. It's a long debate. It's more a realist perspective. Does China see international relations from a realist perspective? Because you said it's not an international liberal order, or China does not believe in it, but a law, international law, which is quite similar to liberalism in a sense. So there's a contradiction maybe. But you had a question? Here was the first question. If you
very short question. You said answer all your questions. Did you? Maybe. With the stereotype, elaborating stereotypes. Probably, you gave a very pragmatic answer. Very good, very elaborate, and I find very convincing about the current situation and direction you brought. But there was a question that you formulated, which was what China models for global governance. Again, against Chinese pragmatists, that German idea, obviously. Generally, we think not from the specific point, but from the overall perspective. And that seems to be a more general question, interesting for me, even if it's not pragmatic. So, she's talking a lot about
a lot.
So, beyond the obvious, need of cooperation now between China and Europe, beyond the what's happening in these years and maybe in 5 years difference. What's the long-term view about global governance? You're not answering, next China and US get power. Because from what you say, it's something else, I think, something more. Where do we want to go? And you said something very interesting. Let's not, which I think was an answer to part of your question, let's not confuse the rule-based order, which means the thing we agreed among us, from the legal international setting, the UN Chart, the Nichtendauer actual. So there is a legal aspect of the question. What do you think China could contribute the best to offer humankind, telling the others, a perspective for global governance that could avoid disasters, the climate crisis, the nuclear threat, the pandemics, the world, the continuous wars? What global governance possible in the Chinese intellectual vision?
Right.
Thank you. Your name was?
Carlo Giovanni.
Thank you. Other questions? Maybe you have several. Yes.
Yes.
Juan Gascon. He is doing his PhD at my university.
Thank you, Professor Gratius. Thank you, Professor, for your dissertation. I was wondering about your insights about what I think are the two topics that could, in some sense, if you build a nostril between China and the EU. And the first one is, what do you think is the possibility between China and the European Union to getting more involved or be part of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict? Avoiding to follow the U.S. strategy, because the U.S. has already taken advantages to sit with Putin and say a lot of proposals, even without Ukraine, and China and the EU, all neighbors of Russia, all very potential and good partners in the commercial, in the economic sense, are not involved in that type of conversation. So I think it's one of the main challenges of saying, okay, we can build a better global governance, but our neighbor is in a war. We are doing nothing broad sense. I know China has offered a lot of in that. And the second is, do you think there is a political will to, for example, sustain more of the economic structure of the UN system? Because, for example, the US is also negotiating with the UN how much money it could put in the system, and we could all wonder about, okay, what about China and the European Union? Are they gonna put more money in the system? Because putting more money, in my point of view, is not about only the structure; it's about the trust to support that system. So that's it. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Third one. Your name, please.
Rafael from Universidad de Pekín. I have a couple of questions. The first one has to be with Latin America and the recent publication of the Chinese plan for Latin America. I think it was the fair one. And I was just punished like several weeks after the national study by the US. And because you touched the issue of Latin America, how it could affect China and the Western Hemisphere approach coming from the United States toward Latin America, what will be the response of China? Because you just move very, very fast into that, for China it's worse, but it is bad, but for Europe it's worse. And I am much more interested in how the reaction of China will be into that strategy. And the second one to talking about is how you mentioned and the relationship with Russia. And how is going linked to that, how do the negotiations among China, Russia, and the US on the nuclear weapons. This week just finished the SPARC agreement, and I know there are some negotiations and talks between China, the Russia, and the US, and what is the position of China in relation with that? What are the demands that China wants to make to these two other actors in the arena? And also, what is the perspective of China on these divisions into the spheres of influence coming from Washington, but not just Washington, also Russia and the position of China on that. Maybe it's linked with all this.
Thank you very much. These are many questions.
Yeah, those are many.
We'll stay here for another hour.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I can answer all of them.
You can,
yeah. Yeah, so maybe
So
I
pick
will
up
start
some.
with the more historical the answers, which is for me, I'm most familiar. I think, and I think it's more reliable in terms of knowledge, because we already have seen history give what kind of lesson history have given us. So I mean, in the 1930s, so I will start with an analogy. So today's situation, for many sides, so you can see there's kind of similarity with the 1930s. So in the 1930s, actually, on the one hand, you can see the legal nations. After the 29 economic crisis, the legal nation really cannot integrate all the countries. So can you see international order is really dissolving at that time. And then what arises is a kind of a thought of, dividing the world into different spheres of influence. So the US already have their sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. So then the Monroe Doctrine was pretty much taken by other powers. For example, Germany. So Germany, in the 1930s, as you know, you can see thinkers like Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt would have this idea of growth arm. And he envisioned that, the Europe is a growth arm, but centered on Germany. He thought Germany should be the dominant power. And he said that, what Germany is going to do in Europe is just like the US has done in Latin America. And then Japan also appropriated this kind of Monroe Doctrine in order to build up their own sphere of influence. And they also imitate Monroe Doctrine in the sense, in the language, we Japan represents the yellow race, and we want to drive the white race out of Asia. So that is, very, Monroe Doctrine, this kind of discourse. And finally ends up in this kind of a East Asian co-prosperity sphere kind of stuff. And at that time, also in terms of economy, every great powers, especially major colonial empires, Britain, France, and also the US, Germany, Japan, they all build up a kind of fortification of economy, which I call this fortification economy, which means that they try to build up a kind of self-sufficient economic system in which you have all these kind of links of production, all within the controlled sphere. So I think this is something, a kind of possible multipolarity we have seen in the 1930s, but which is disastrous, in a way, very disastrous, right? So I mean, this is something we need to avoid. So first of all, I think, the Donald Trump really does not have this kind of clear intention, to allow other powers to have a sphere of influence, because he need to play veto power. So this veto power is always there. So this is not like, the 1930s. And the other important thing is that, I think today, we do have, with later globalization, and especially with this kind of globalization in information, we do have a lot of more easier communication with each other. And then I think this become a kind of infrastructure for the world to think about, we can go beyond this kind of dilemma, to not have this fortificational economy, but we continue a productive form of interdependence. Yeah, so this is why this kind of a dialogue become very important. In other words, although the U.S. had this pressure, and that China and other countries feel this pressure, but I do think that for the sake of human race, we do need to think about how to continue the interdependence, the framework. So I mean, obviously, we need to, first of all, United Nations and the major world organization, those kind of international organizations should still play a very important role. And we should have a world governance, obviously, that should be there. And there should be emphasis upon the common challenge we have. A lot of common challenge. We have first of all, what China and the European Union share is, our concern about this kind of ecology. In China, the president of China have this concept, ecological civilization, which is really a new concept. It's really a new concept, ecological civilization, which means that previously civilization is only focused upon the human, the human world. But now we need to think about the human, plants, and animals. So this constitutes one civilization. So I mean, on this side, China and Europe have a lot in common. While the U.S. had dropped the issue, they already dropped this issue. So I think this common challenge, and also a lot of things like nuclear non-proliferation, and this kind of even pandemic prevention, which we just underwent in the last few years. So we know how dangerous it is. So all these need to be some kind of framework going on. I think for China, China's mindset is always like this. We, on the bottom line, China always think about it in the worst case. But then we always have a futuristic ideal. So this framework of mind is actually starting from ancient China. On the one hand, China, if you look at Chinese, their mind, sometimes they sound like a realist. They are very realistic and pragmatic. But always, China always have a vision, have about the unity of humanity. So they're starting from our ancient philosopher talking about 天下, all under heaven. And all under heaven are for the people all under heaven. So I think this kind of vision are always there. And during the 20th century communist revolution, there's a very interesting translation. In the international anthem, in the international song shared by all the communist parties all over the world, in which said that the proletariat is gonna be the master of the world. So then this word was translated into Chinese as 天下. Yeah, as 天下. So it's a very confusion, traditional concept. So I mean, even in this communist international song, you can see this kind of a resonation with the traditional understanding of the world as a whole. This is some kind of the Chinese input in this kind of socialist tradition of the 20th century. So I mean, in terms of this ideal, always this ideal is there. But if you look at the practice, today China, we always have there might be some slight difference between China and our partners in the global north, because China always insists upon the importance of sovereignty. Why sovereignty is very important? Because as a country like China, we just 1,000 years ago, China was a semi-colony. We just get rid of this colonialism and then become fully independent. And so we know autonomy. What is important about this autonomy is, and you look at other countries like India, Brazil, they all share this kind of vision about the importance of sovereignty, because they believe sovereignty is something really protects them from the external exploitation, imperialism, and then they could have this kind of modernization. So I think this is something China shared with the global South. However, China may think a little bit more actively than our partners in the global South, because we will actively think about what kind of common experience or institution we can create, we can share for all those sovereign states. In other words, sovereignty is one thing, but on the other hand, we need to have some kind, shared layer of institutions and cultures and values. So we'll talk about common values. China's term used is not a universal value. We use common values. Why? Because in Chinese philosophy, we have different understanding about what it means by universality. So universality have different connotation in different languages, I would say. So in the European language, universality is related to long tradition, philosophical tradition, while in China, universality means something different. So then we tend to use something easier to understand, which is common value, which is something we could be updated from time to time. Like 20 years ago, you may have this set of value, and then after a few years, then you have another set of value. As long as we have this we share this discourse, in terms of this discursive interaction, then some values could be shared. And we believe a lot of values are common values. However, the ordering of these values might be different. So for example, in terms of human rights, then China have a different understanding of human rights. So the first generation of human rights, focus upon, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, those kind of freedom. And the second generation is about social welfare, social protection. And third generation is about the collective, the national determination, those kind of stuff. And you can see that there are different ordering. In the global south, basically we tend to value the second generation and third generation, as something we think more important. And while here in Europe, usually the first generation is regarded as the basis for other values. So I mean, this kind of variation is there, and I think that this really needs kind of discussion, because values are not simply, they are not come from some kind of innate essence. It's really come from conditions, economic and social conditions. So we had to analyze what kind of social condition and political condition give rise to the different ordering of values. So then, if you really want to reach some common values, maybe the good way is to change the economic and social conditions, rather than simply denounce the other as you are the barbarian, right? So I think that is the Marxist principle I learned. Yeah. So I do think it's a historical materialism. I uphold to this kind of ideas, and obviously, you're right. The rules-based order and the international law-based international order. Well, rule-based order may have more connotations. It may point out to principles beyond the positive law, right? However, what is debatable is what kind of principles, right? So usually, in US and Europe, when people talk about rules-based international law, usually there's a kind of assumption, focus upon the global south, north, pretty much. A set of values, global north shared. So this is our so-called rules-based international order. So then I do think that what these norms should be discussed and debated, obviously. And China tried to make it very clear that we abide with the legal international law, this kind of international law-based international order. So as a response, basically the purpose is to make it clear, what kind of rules we actually follow. So that is basically intention. And as for the Russian problem, I think this is a difficult question, because here I think many people think that China are siding with Russia. There's such a perception. Then what is my response? First of all, if you look at China's action with both sides, we kept this trade relation with both countries. We import Russian gas and we sell a lot of civilian commodities to Russia, but we are doing the same with Ukraine. We bought a lot of agricultural products from Ukraine, and also we are selling them a lot of civilian goods. In terms of the military use of goods, strict limit. There's strict limit. Of course, there may be the case, those companies in Ukraine and Russia, they will buy, the pieces, and they try to even a lot of commodities, they can be used both for civilian use and military use, and they buy it, in the name of civilian use, and then they put it into something else, and this happens, both in Ukraine and in Russia. So I mean, I think basically, China has a very balanced position in terms of the both sides, and we. Basically, the official way to put it is like this. We understand that the concern of sovereignty is very important. And we also concern that, the issue of security is also very important. So it's a very balanced tone. In other words, so far we did not recognize, Crimea as a part of Russia. No, China did not do that. And second, we also believe that the Russia is concerned about the eastward expansion of NATO has some grounds. So think about the Cuban Missile Crisis. When USSR installed the nuclear weapon in Cuba, what's the reaction of the US, right? So I mean, this kind of reaction is kind of quite often seen, at least from the U.S. side. The U.S. always acting in such a way. So I mean, China had this very balanced position here. And during the second year of this war, China made a proposal to the both sides. And guess what happens? Ukraine declined China's proposal. And after a few years, when Ukraine come up with their own proposal, and you look at what the content, very similar to China's proposal. Yeah. So I mean, China tries very best. We tried very hard. However, we are dealing with this mentality. The mentality is, black or white. If you are not siding with us, then you are our enemies. There's no position for neutrality. So I don't think, this is the kind of understanding really beneficial to EU and China's relations. So there should be mutual understanding on this issue. And China, obviously, we are working very hard to build up, try to at least get some kind of ceasefire. Some ceasefire should be set up. And in terms of the negotiation, I think, in terms of this kind of what kind of role China can play, all these are open for discussion. So I think our European friends should understand China's position here. We are not biased toward one side. So and the institutional part of this world governance, I think this is a difficult part because I think the first step is to make certain our commitment to world governance. So, I mean, some shared values, shared vision is very important. But when we go to institutions, we always encounter many, many problems. So, I mean, in terms of the UN, so there's always, this kind of disagreement in the Security Council of those different powers. And there's, especially with the Gaza issue, you can see it clearly. The UN has a lot of conference and really pass a resolution. Then US veto many times. So it's really cannot perceive that. And what can we do with this kind of veto power? And someone would argue that let's cancel this veto power. Then the proposal may be vetoed by. Yeah. So I mean, as for this kind of arrangement, I think this post-war arrangement is really very, very hard to change. Usually, historically, this kind of international setting often changed after major war. Usually, after major war. So usually,
not this time.
Right. So usually we don't.
Not.
We really don't want such a big war. So really, we really need some kind of further discussion. Today at least we need. The first step has not been taken. So first of all, there should be serious discussion of the different sides about how to reform the UN, and also about these international organizations. You know, what kind of fiscal revenue they can get, financial support they can get. Should China increase its own input? Should European Union, Spain, France, Germany increase their input? And with our input increased, does that mean that our say in this organization also increases? All these are very pragmatic problems. Then how about the global south? You know, if China and the EU, we increase our investment and then we have the major domination of this organization, then how about global south, who does not have much money? Then what kind of seats you allocate to them? So it's not simply a matter of economic investment. So I think there should be a lot of political concerns there. So I do think that, you know, here, I think China and Spain, we can share a lot in common, because both countries, we can serve as a bridge between the global north and global south. Spain, in Latin America, you know, so many countries, Spanish speaking, and culturally close to Spain, always. And for China, you know, economically now few and few regard China as a member of global south. But China always regarded itself as a global south. Why? Because China, we used to be a semi-colony, and we share this kind of political experience with those countries in the global south. So then, you know, this ambivalent position, in a way, it is also an advantage, which means that, you know, China can talk to the global north about, you know, a lot of other issues and talk to the global south in different issues. So I mean, this kind of conversation, maybe we should start first, before we figure out, you know, what kind of institutional platforms we can have. And in terms of the this kind of world governance, I think China's leader has 4 proposals in terms of how to set up a kind of world governance. But if you read it, you know, basically, first of all, you know, there's an emphasis on diversity, and with the focus upon, you know, respect for sovereignty. And then, you know, the second layer is, you know, how to strengthen commonality, you know, build up a common institution, build up common values, which is not against sovereignty. In other words, you know, the responsibility to protect should not be exerted by like a NATO, you know, military intervention. China's position is always that, you know, UN Security Council, it should be primary the organization to ratify, you know, a military the actions. So then, because of this internal conflict among different powers, there's a huge problem. But the principle is there. Then, what kind of institutional platform we can improve? I think it's a issue for open discussion. And the problem of Latin America, I think that, this really creates a lot of challenges to China, because we are the biggest trading partner with most Latin American countries, right? So there's a lot of investment and infrastructure building. But here, I do think that, you know, the conflict of the interest of China and the US is not necessarily totally in conflict. Why? Because if the US really want to solve the problem, like, you know, illegal immigration and like, you know, the drug trafficking, those problems, and at least the US should make sure that, you know, it could partially solve the problem of development in Latin America, because poverty and regional instability creates those problems. Then, if China can help Latin American countries to develop their own economy and build a more stable society, that's going to, in the end, could help, you know, the U.S. to solve these problems. So today, I think I see that, you know, Donald Trump's policy was driven by 2 actually targets, which is not totally, you know, on the same direction. So one is to solve these problems, like, you know, domestic problem, immigration and this drug stuff. And the other one is about hegemony, to maintain the U.S. hegemony globally. Then the problem is that if you really want to solve the first layer of problem, then China must have some kind of space in Latin America, because this is very helpful, not helpful for Latin American countries, but also for the U.S. itself to solve these problems. So I think this kind of discussion can be done actually between the U.S. and China. And as for the Latin American countries, I also think that we need to make a distinction between different countries. So, for example, Panama, obviously regarded as the U.S. as a very, key country, right? The strait, the U.S. really, the canal, the U.S. really want to control. But if you look at another country like Chile or Argentina or Brazil, might be slightly different. So I mean, today in China, we are trying to do more area studies in Latin America in order to make sure in each country what kind of cooperation can be done. And this kind of cooperation are under current geopolitical situation are still sustainable. I think this is something going on, and I think that we can learn a lot from Spanish thinkers, because Spain knows those Spanish speaking countries much better than China did. So in the future, I think that in terms of Latin American studies, I do think that we have a lot to share, to talk with. Well, maybe I did not address some of the problems. Yeah, but I spent too long time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I stay with, there's no Chinese model of global governance. It is very similar to what it is now. So we have to...
there are principles.
Yeah.
I would say there are principles exactly. For China has outlined. And there are also some programs, specific programs. But in terms of institutions, I think how to reform the current institution, I think there's still a lot to discuss.
Therefore, the UN system is still our main international organization where we can build further global governance with China and the EU. No, this is an interesting point. So we will continue our dialogue, maybe having a dialogue between EU and China on one of those topics you mentioned. And also that this is true, China is a more stable partner than the US right now, for the moment. This can change, we can have it. And in a sense, Europe is still this liberal model, this supranational attempt to overcome nation states. Now we are in an age of nation states again, so it's a very difficult situation for the EU, particularly. And I think we should continue this dialogue. Very interesting, your remarks, your perspective. The Western view, the US or the European view, and also the Chinese perspective. So thank you very much for your open-minded remarks, your comments. And we finish this event here, and we will come together, I think, in March with the ambassador of China will come here.
Great.
I can't remember the date right now because we are still defining it. But then maybe who is interested in China. It is not a series on China. It is just a coincidence. We will have also hopefully Mr. Borrell here, so talking about more the European side of international politics. But thank you very much for coming and for your insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much.